Welcome back to King Lights, and today we're navigating the dark side of Western abundance to identify, understand, and overcome. Let's walk in balance. Watch the full video on YouTube at Petra Worldwide.
Ladies and gentlemen, the King of Kings is in the house. Warriors, take your positions, and let's get ready to prosper.
In the 17th century Western culture, carrying extra weight or being fat was widely viewed as a clear status symbol. It represented wealth, privilege, and high society standing. It celebrated a sign of prosperity, health, and security. While the abundance of the West still exists, today we take GLP-1s to manage and reduce weight. What changed? Why are we no longer so proud of being fat? While the economic spending is a massive part of the equation, the importance of market abundance in Western economies runs much deeper than getting people to keep their wallets open. In our modern capital framework, abundance isn't just a byproduct of a healthy and successful economy. It is the engine that drives growth, stability, and political legitimacy. Managing wealth, managing abundance is so important that we've built complete agencies around managing abundance. When you think about abundance in the modern economy, it probably looks something a little bit like this. Like I mentioned, being fat was always a sign of wealth and prosperity. So there's no wonder abundance is kind of a jolly fat fellow, if you will. But abundance is always under attack. Abundance is under attack from a number of economic sources and just changes in society. Abundance is under attack from food insecurity, inflation, fuel prices, AI. There are a number of factors that are constantly chasing and attacking abundance. In a consumption-driven economy, market abundance creates a psychological environment of confidence. When consumers see shelves stocked full, they see endless choices, and they have a readily, easily supply of credit, it signals stability for them. This confidence encourages continual spending, which keeps the economic cycle flowing. Everybody knows in the Western culture, you have to keep spending. That's how this economic engine is built. If abundance gives way to, let's say, scarcity, or consumers start to feel shifts in product supply, consumers will hoard their cash, they'll stop spending, and the economy slides down into a recession. This is a hard environment in which to make decisions, because today's environment, today's economic environment, we are struggling to manage the forces that are coming against abundance. And how you invest your time, your energy, and your capital, it all matters. It is a long-term impact to your legacy and the decisions that your family and the people that outlive you will be stuck to live with. So let's talk about some of the influences, some of the headwinds that are pounding against abundance today. We know that we've got in the United States a new Fed chair, and everyone in the world is watching that person. I was watching a press conference a couple days ago, and the press is hanging on every word, looking for some type of indication on where this person's going to go with interest rates, because interest rates is another measure in which we use to manage abundance. We know that inflation has been rising. We have a rising cost of inflation. Inflation in the month of April was like 4.8%. We saw an uptick there, largely driven by fuel prices. But we know there's a clear correlation with inflation and abundance, because abundance requires discretionary income. If there's no discretionary income because inflation has eaten it away, or the fuel prices because of the war impacts, as discretionary income evaporates, abundance doesn't have anywhere to go because there's no spending there that's taking place. Housing market, we all know what's happened in the housing market. We know in lots of areas, lots of communities in America, we've got an excess of inventory. And we also have some markets where people are just sitting on their homes because the interest rates that they're sitting on are 2-3%. They're not going to move and go and have to buy another property with higher interest rate. So we know we've got some instability in the housing market. One of the largest disruptors is certainly AI and the job displacements that's going on. So with AI and the introduction now, companies are starting to look for their investment to be returned on all of the infrastructure building on AI. That's a huge impact. So there's a lot of work and a lot of effort around managing abundance. And so anytime you have abundance, you also have the other side. There's nothing in life that's one-sided, including abundance. So while this is a difficult environment in which to make decisions, we know we have to make decisions to move forward and what that means for the people that we love and support, the people that are depending on us. And so in our pursuit of legacy, we are trained to hunt for one thing. We are trained to hunt for abundance. We look for abundance of capital. That's why we start businesses. We look for abundance in inventory. We love to keep our refrigerator stock, our pantry stock. We love, again, that sense of all the shelves are full in the store. We have some level of stability, and now we're excited to continue spending. Technology abundance shows up in output and productivity. That is a direct contributor to business capital and growth. So there's a lot of work that's involved with managing abundance. But let's talk about the other side of abundance, because as leaders, here's what you really have to consider. As leaders, you have to consider and come to accept the fact that every time, every asset is driven to extreme abundance, it creates an equal and opposite liability. It's almost like the law of motion, right? An object in motion stays in motion. In economics, this is the law of diminishing utility. And when you take it to its fullest extent, I call it the inversion of abundance. When a resource becomes infinitely cheap and universally available, it ceases to be an asset and it really transforms into a liability. We're going to talk a little bit about specifically what that means and how that happens. So abundance today in our current day economy, it looks a little bit like this. While abundance was happy and jolly before, now you'll see the smile has been wiped off of his face. He's really paying attention because the winds have gotten stronger. The influences have become more aggressive and they're coming from all angles. So in the global headwinds, we as consumers are all kind of sitting on the outskirts of the arena. We're on the outskirts of the arena paying attention to what's going to happen with abundance. We're watching to see which of these forces will be correctly managed. And this is the job of so many of the agencies that we've created to manage abundance. Let's drill down and talk about some specific areas of abundance and how it shows up in your individual life, in your individual economy, and how you need to think about it as an individual leader. One area of abundance that we all are impacted, we all are experiencing in the current society is the abundance of intelligence. Specifically, we now have an infinite, almost zero cost abundance of artificial intelligence. The dark side of that, the economic dark side of that intelligence, is an abundance of fear. Fear surrounding unemployment and the labor capital disruptions that will come as a result of this abundance of artificial intelligence. The critical transformation that people are going through and dealing with this level of abundance. This is the dark side of abundance. Abundance is necessary, as I mentioned, but the transformation, the transitions that you have to go through As a result of that is where the pain takes place. All abundance, all transition comes with some level of pain. So information becomes commoditized, and it begins to drive a social and human behavior where we have human trust deficiencies. How many of us are in that place where we rely on AI for an increasing number of our daily inquiries, our ability to know what's going to happen, ask questions, have conversations? There are lots of videos out on the internet where people have developed dependent relationships on this artificial intelligence. And that's the dark side of this abundance for this particular item. Well, what about the abundance of cheap food? Let's talk about that for a second, because we know that in the United States, we've done a wonderful job of subsidizing agriculture to make sure that we can spread the yield of the harvest. We have a lot of people to feed, and feeding those people means that we have to spread that yield. So we end up with hyper-processed foods, and those hyper-processed foods often lack the nutrition that our bodies need. So the dark side of that abundance is global obesity. And we know that. And, what are we doing to manage that dark side? That's part of the question, because here's the transformational piece of that. The transformational piece is, how do we manage our healthcare systems? How do we manage public health awareness? How do we keep people healthy in an environment where cheap food continues to erode the undercurrent of health? The abundance of convenience. We all love convenience. We love to have everything in our lives quick, fast, and easy. We are driven as a culture, as a people, that we like quick, fast, and easy. And on the surface, we don't pay attention to what it costs to have quick, fast, and easy. We have engineered a society, we've engineered our retail experiences to almost be in a position where there's no human interactions. I recently visited a local Panera, and I was astonished to be able to go to the kiosk, place my order, get my buzzer, pick my food up when it was ready. I had an entire dining experience and never spoke to another human being. That is a level of convenience that has a dark side. And the dark side of that is just unprecedented consumer attention fragmentation. There's a deficit in our ability to pay attention, to think critically. We know that the attention span for most people is super short. And so this super highway of convenience is certainly part of that. So how do you think about that as leaders? How do you deal with that? So the critical transformation is, we have to be careful with the abundance of convenience, because what that's done for us is it's trained us as consumers to treat goods, services, and people as completely disposable. The leadership choice is this. As leaders and business owners, you have to ask yourself, where are you accepting cheap abundance today for a higher price tomorrow? In your everyday life, in your everyday engagement, ask yourself a foundational question, because anytime a tool, a digital tool in this case, becomes a tool that makes your life completely effortless and instantly abundant, you have to pause and ask the leadership question: what foundational skill, protection, future cash flow am I trading away for this temporary convenience? And when you ask yourself that question, ask it in the context of understanding the people that will outlive you, because your decisions today will impact the people that will outlive you. So the downside of how we think about abundance, how we respond to abundance, and this correlating dark side lies here. This is the meat of this, because what we have today is we have a godlike world. We have human behavior in a godlike world. We have developed godlike technology that can provide us with the power to reshape markets. We can clone voices and images and animals. And if we're not careful, we can eliminate jobs and people with a simple click or a few words. That's a godlike technology in a human type world. Because even with that technology, we still have to manage our lives and our businesses with our God-given brain. Our God-given brain has been evolved, developed over centuries, almost from the founding and creation, to be wired for extreme scarcity and protection from threats. And so understanding the hardwiring of your paradigm, is where the value will come from and help you make great decisions. Because when a godlike technology engages with a God-given brain, it could create predictable patterns that are wealth destroying. So we're going to talk about 3 of those right now. We're going to talk about 3 of the human behaviors to avoid, because in order to protect your estate, you must recognize that your brain is hardwired and it can actively mismanage modern economic news as a result of being hardwired. So human brain wiring point number 1. It's the threat and opportunity paradox. What this means is that our brains can be hardwired to over-detect the threat and to under-detect an opportunity. The biology of this looks like this. In nature, if you hear rustling in the bush and you mistake a rustling leaf for a tiger, you're probably going to live through that experience. But if you mistake a tiger for a rustling leaf, it's going to kill you. The point being, our brains are hardwired for profound negative bias. The way that negative bias shows up in your economics everyday life is, as leaders, we tend to over-index on loud market threats while missing out on quiet systemic shifts in the marketplace. The noise of the environment can be overwhelmingly loud. And if we are hardwired without recognition of our hardwiring, without recognition of our paradigm, we will certainly over-index on the threat and miss the opportunity. We spend millions of dollars defending legacy models, outdated processes, outdated procedures, our inability to move forward with new technology. This behavior, this hardwiring, this is a hardwiring that is the reason that Blockbuster is not Netflix. Why didn't Blockbuster become the next Netflix? Why does Netflix even exist when Blockbuster was here before? Well, because in 2000, Netflix presented itself to Blockbuster and said, hey, we want you to buy us for $50 million. The current CEO at Blockbuster at the time essentially laughed them out of the office, saying, hey, this .com thing is a fad. We have almost 10,000 brick and mortar locations. The strength of our brand is in our brick and mortar locations. We're not investing $50 million in some passing fad of a .com download your movie event. Today, we know that Netflix is worth $360 billion. This hardwiring behavior essentially caused the CEO of Blockbuster to mistake the noise in the bush for a rustling leaf when that noise was a tiger, and Blockbuster is dead as a result of that. The same story plays out with BlackBerry and Apple. BlackBerry introduced its first device 100 years before Apple was even on the scene, 1899. Apple comes along with touch technology. BlackBerry wanted nothing to do with it. Now, BlackBerry is dead and Apple is thriving. As leaders, you have to pay attention to your paradigms. Understand how you are hardwired in your decision making in an economic environment where there's a lot of headwind and there's a lot of noise. Brain hardwiring number 2 is the familiarity paradox. We all know this. We've heard this over our lives over and over and over again, that we are much more comfortable. We are massively preferenced or biased towards the familiar over the novel. And the way that shows up in the biology is you have a survival instinct. We all have a survival instinct. And staying on the path that we know represented safety. It stopped us from being poisoned or ambushed. That's the hardwiring of your brain. But your brain naturally releases stress hormones when confronted with radical change. So it's easy to instantly feel stressed out when you're faced with something that's radically different. So hardwiring in your brain, point number 3, is the efficiency paradox. We are hardwired to preserve energy at all costs. Our brain tissue consumes roughly 20% of the body's metabolic energy. In a world of scarce calories and deep critical thinking, it becomes a luxury. Your brain naturally defaults to a position where it's going to consume the lowest amount of glucose energy. Now, what does that look like when it shows up in your economics? Well, for business leaders, you can routinely find yourself substituting rigorous financial thinking or modeling for lazy consumer-driven assumptions. We can get into a place where we're just following our competitors. We're doing the same thing everybody else is doing, or we find ourselves in a spot where we are doing the same thing we've always done because it's too energy consuming to think differently, to think outside the box. So human brain wiring, point number 3, is understanding your brain's natural tendency to conserve your energy. As you think through that, what happens is you run the risk of a collapse of the complexity. The biology here is exactly what I just said. The brain starts spending metabolic energy when you get hyper-focused, you get hyper-intense, you start going to a deeper level. It's going to collapse the extreme complexity into a very simple binary narrative. And that binary narrative is what we've been trying to avoid, where you're thinking solutions only have one of 2 options. It's either the light's red or the light's green. And that doesn't always make sense. And so how does it show up again? It shows up in polar opposite thinkings. I'm going to use the AI narrative again, where you have your utopians and you have your people that are just believing in the apocalypse. The difference between these 2 polar opposite positions is the clear picture of the binary narrative that your brain normally defaults to. The utopians are in a position of thinking, okay, AI is going to solve all the world's problems, it's going to make infinite wealth, it's going to eliminate labor and issue in paradise for humans. While the people that have the apocalyptic mindset, they're in a whole different space. They're saying, hey, this AI technology is going to steal all the jobs, collapse the financial markets, and destroy human civilization. Well, history teaches us the truth of the matter normally lies in the middle ground. It's neither of these extremes. Life in general, neither positive, negative, normally exists on the extremes. It's always something in the middle, the averages, if you will. So the economic cost of binary thinking is if you adopt the utopian narrative and you're buying into a narrative that leads to over leveraging into speculative spending and technologies that are not proven out yet. It can cause you to chase hype in the circles, that are leading you to events that are just not profitable. If you do the apocalyptic narrative, your perspective paralyzes your organization, freezes your capital expenditures, and then all of a sudden you found that you've been outmaneuvered by agile competitors who deployed capital in an incremental way. Your wealth tip on this one is avoid the binary thinking. Avoid the polar opposites of it's green or it's red, because the truth of the matter is going to reside somewhere in the middle. So as strategic thinkers, strategic leaders, here's where you should be. Head to the middle road. That's our job. As your financial advisor, our job is to help you avoid thinking in ways that are binary. Think through options and land you in the middle ground. The leaders who win the next 2 decades will not be those with the most godlike technology, nor will it be those who run and retreat in fear. It's going to be crowns given to people who acknowledge their biological biases, and they reject binary narratives, and they execute disciplined strategies and plans. So let's audit where you are. Let's talk about where you are. Let's audit your modeling. Let's look at areas where you're vulnerable, and let's engineer a clear, uncompromising path forward. The strategic decisions have to insulate your business and your personal lives, because when you're at harmony, when the system, the environment is at harmony, and we have abundance in the marketplace that has managed or is managing a strong balance with all of the headwinds, the forces that are opposing it, it looks something like this. You got abundance with a smile back on his face. You still have all of the outside market forces, but there's a grand strategy in place that allows abundance to reside where he's residing, while the market forces around him are doing what they do, and the people are still watching. There's a place for that. I'm Nathan Weaver. Thanks for joining us on Kingdoms, Wealth, and Wisdom. We look forward to seeing you and supporting you soon. Take care.